Enemy at the Gates, 2001. What are some of the differences between Vasily Zaitsev, as played by Jude and the real Vasily Zaitsev, who was honored as hero of the Soviet Union? Zaitsev was celebrated as an expert sniper, but who was the woman who's had more confirmed kills than he had? How did some of the World War II Red Army Battle of Stalingrad veterans respond to the inaccuracies of the film? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
I've been such a fool, Vasily. Man will always be man. There's no new man. We tried so hard to create a society that was equal, where there'd be nothing to envy your neighbor, but there's always something to envy. A smile, a friendship, something you don't have and want to appropriate. In this world, even a Soviet one, there will always be rich and poor. Rich in gifts, poor in gifts, rich in love, poor in love. Tanya isn't coming back. She's dead, Vasily. She was cut down by shrapnel. It was quick. I don't think she even saw it coming. She was on her way back to you as soon as she had seen Mrs. Filippov off to the boats. She was coming back for you. She was right. You're a good man, Vasily. I want to help you, Vasily. Let me do one last thing. Something useful for a change. Let me show you where the major is. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 229th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, tell your battle buddies with whom you share the trenches in this bloody and unforgiving war that we call life about Backlook Cinema. Enemy at the Gates is definitely one of my favorite movies that I have a lot of nostalgia for. I just remember being so impressed by the atmosphere, the acting, and the tension provided by the story. It was also interesting that we got to see World War II told from the perspective of a different country, particularly the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. During the war, the Soviet Union was under tremendous threat and under extraordinary pressure from Nazi Germany. Rewatching this movie serves to remind us that the Nazis are the bad guys, and a major point of contention between the Germans and the Soviets was the city known as Volgograd. But back then, it was called Stalingrad, named for one of the USSR's most powerful rulers, Joseph Stalin. The Battle of Stalingrad is still considered the largest urban battle in history and the largest battle in World War II. The Russian victory at Stalingrad is considered a major turning point of the war. By the end, the Axis powers suffered over 1.5 million total who were killed, injured, or captured, and the Soviet of that number had over 1.1 million. The movie focuses on a major figure in that battle, Vasily Zaitsev, whose skill at sharpshooting grabbed the attention of Soviet political officers and journalists, who used Zaitsev's many successful missions as propaganda to raise the morale of their troops. By the end of the Battle of Stalingrad, Zaitsev had killed 225 enemy troops. In doing my research, it seems that they left a lot of things out in order to craft their narrative that might have made the story more interesting. For example, Zaitsev was not only an expert sniper, but he trained others at his sniper school during the battle. Students he trained became members of his sniper group that they called the Hares. Hares are bigger than rabbits, but I'm not exactly sure why they're called the Hares. One of the other things that makes some hares different from rabbits is that some hares change their coloring in the wintertime. So during the summer months, they're brown, and in the winter, they turn white. So maybe they're called the Hares because of their ability to hide and blend into the background. At any rate, Tanya Chernova, played by Rachel Weisz, is depicted as an earnest fighter in the movie, but the real Tanya Chernova was also a sniper and was a graduate of Zaitsev's sniper school and a member of the Hares. This is all left out of the movie. On one mission, Chernova killed 24 Nazis, or as she might say it, broke 24 sticks. To Chernova, killing Nazis was like breaking sticks, and that was about all that they were good for. Another tidbit is that Tanya Chernova was Russian American. But in a movie, you don't really get a sense that Chernova was ever a sniper. And I think it would have been a little more interesting if they portrayed her in a sniper. And as a matter of fact, in the movie, they really only portrayed two Russian snipers. You had Zaitsev himself, who the movie is about. And then there was also someone who was partnered with, someone who he was partnered with briefly, Kolkikov. But there were a lot of women snipers that were in his group, and they don't, even though you see other people go on missions with him, you don't actually see them, sniping people. You don't see them actually going into a hiding place and killing people from a distance. So you don't really get to see other people take on that sniper role. And I think that's probably a missed opportunity. The movie centers around best friends Danilov and Zaitsev, who were in competition for the affections of Chernova. The love affair between Zaitsev and Chernova actually occurred, but Danilov is a composite character created for the film. Zaitsev and Chernova were separated during the battle, and Chernova and a small detachment of snipers were sent on a special mission to assassinate the commander of the German army at the Battle of Stalingrad. She was badly wounded during that mission and sent to a hospital. While she was there, she received false information about the death of Zaitsev, and the two never saw each other again. In fact, they both believed that the other was dead until they were senior citizens. Obviously, in the movie, this plays out differently, and in such a way that they find each other at the end of the war. They wanted a happy ending, as is a tendency with Hollywood films. Otherwise, this could have played out as a kind of tragedy, like a kind of Romeo and Juliet tragedy. Well, in Romeo and Juliet, the two lovers, they kill themselves at the end of the play. If this movie was more true to life, then Zaitsev and Chernova would have never seen each other again, and they never would have gotten back together. While they're alive, they're separated, so they could not continue their love affair, and they couldn't build a life together as I presume that they had wanted. So this would have been a bittersweet memory, and I guess the producers or the director, the people who crafted this story probably didn't think that the audience was ready for something like that. But let's find out more about this film in the opening credits. During the conflict that the Russians call the Great Patriotic War, the Soviet Union took a desperate stance against Nazi Germany at the city named for one of the Soviets' most honored comrades, Joseph Stalin. The Battle of Stalingrad became the symbolic last stand for the Soviet army. During this battle, there was a chance meeting between a young army grunt and an ambitious political officer. This meeting sparked a friendship that would launch the army grunt to fame for his incredible shooting skills and further the rank and prestige of that political officer. Their friendship would evolve into a rivalry over the love of a beautiful and intelligent civilian fighter. It was released March 16th, 2001 by Paramount Pictures, Mandalay Pictures, and Casey Median. It grossed over $51 million in the US and Canada and over $96 million worldwide on a reported budget of $68 million. And that is not great. I thought this movie did way better than that. And not only did I think that, but I enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed it as a blockbuster that it should have been. But this movie is clearly not a blockbuster, not even with the worldwide totals that it clear its production budget and its marketing budget. So this movie is probably considered a flop. If we adjust it for inflation, that means if it would have grossed $96 million had it been released today, or $181 million worldwide on a budget that would have been $128 million. So not great. This movie starred Jude Law as Vasily Zaitsev, and you might have seen him in The Talented Mr. Ripley, Closer, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and Captain Marvel. I always liked Jude Law, and I think it started with this movie. So he's very talented, and I think he's very good at this. Ed Harris, who we talked about just recently, he plays Erwin Koenig, or Major Erwin Koenig. And you might have seen him in Pain and Gain, A History of Violence, Radio, and a show that we recently talked about, or a movie that we recently talked about, Glengarry Glen Ross. Joseph Fiennes plays Commissar Danilov, and you might have seen him in Shakespeare in Love, Risen, Elizabeth, or The Merchant of Venice. Rachel Weisz plays Tanya Chernova, and you might have seen her in The Constant Gardener, The Lobster, Black Widow, or The Mummy. I think most people love her in The Mummy. As a matter of fact, I think it was a little bit perturbed when they replaced her in, I think, the second Mummy movie. I think they replaced her in The Mummy Returns. Or was it the third one? I can't remember, but I remember they replaced her and I didn't like it. Bob Hoskins played Nikita Khrushchev, and you might have seen him in Super Mario Brothers, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or Hook. Ron Perlman played Kulkikov, and I enjoyed him in Hellboy, but I've never seen him in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Or you might have caught him in Pacific Rim. And at last we have Gabriel Thompson, who played Sasha Filipov, and he has not had a bunch of appearances in movies, but you might have seen him in The New Adventures of Pinocchio or The Lost Choices. Directed by Jean-Jacques Annaud, and he's had 16 films and a miniseries, and some of those films are The Name of the Rose, Wolf Totem, 7 Years in Tibet, Day of the Falcon, Two Brothers, The Bear, and Quest for Fire. So a lot of his films are really prestigious and they're held in high esteem, especially 7 Years in Tibet. I remember when I was growing up. Well, not growing up, I was already grown then, but back in the day, people could not stop talking about that movie. This movie was also written by Jean-Jacques Annaud and also Alan Godard. And It should also be said that elements of William Craig's 1973 nonfiction book, Enemy at the Gates, The Battle for Stalingrad, were used for this film, but wasn't considered a direct adaptation. So this is probably why he remains uncredited for this film. Jean-Jacques Annaud, well, he had written some other films. Some of the films he's written, like Notre Dame on Fire and I'm Shy But I'll Heal, he wrote but he didn't direct. But some other films like Wolf Totem, Day of the Falcon, and Two Brothers, he both wrote and directed. And the three films that I just mentioned were also co-written by Alan Godard, the same as with this movie. And as for himself, Alan Godard also wrote Wings of Courage, Palace, Outward Signs of Wealth, It's Not Me, It's Him, and The Name of the Rose. I've not heard of any of these movies. I think that they were all like international films, like they were released in other places. The composer for this movie was the amazing James Horner, and you might have heard his music in Day of the Falcon, The Karate Kid, Avatar, Apocalypto, The Legend of Zorro, which we talked about previously, Radio, and Troy, which is, if you're on social media, for some reason that I can't figure out, people can't stop talking about Troy. And for the record, while I enjoy Troy, I also know it's not like the best movie ever in the history of the world, like people are pretending it is now. And I can't figure out why people are saying that. Anyway, I'm not sure which Karate Kid movie this is. I'm pretty sure it's the original, but it could be the remake. I wasn't diligent in making sure, or separating which was which when I was writing these credits. But still, James Horner, he's an amazing composer. And as for announcements, I got a little note from YouTube for the episode that featured the Man in the Iron Mask. It was I think that was like 2 episodes ago. This is from @JohnHorgan1713, and he wrote, "Great show. Found out about it through the Not a Bomb Boys. I co-hosted a YouTube channel called And Now for Something a Little Bit Different." And by Not a Bomb Boys, he's talking about Not a Bomb Podcast, hosted by Troy and Brad. And that's an amazing show. If you haven't heard it, go check that out. And I haven't listened to or watched And Now for Something a Little Bit Different, but I really want to check that out because the Not a Bomb Boys, as he calls them, always mention that show, and I've been meaning to check it out. So anyways, that's it for the opening credit, and now we're going to see what our favorite parts are. So as far as like the themes for this movie, there are, I mean, I guess in a kind of patriotic style movie or something that's jingoistic, it's going to be a lot of the same themes. So themes of loyalty, duty, patriotism, those sort of things. But in this particular case, it's also like loyalty to friends and kind of like themes of like jealousy or lust or want, those type of things. Because there's an interesting love triangle element that is present. And it's also a heavy theme about the story we tell ourselves, because this story kind of is told through the premise of like propaganda and how they used the propaganda of Vasily to encourage their troops, to motivate their troops, and not just the troops in the Russian military, but also to give the people hope. Because like in America, we're not used to actually like defending the homeland. It's like there's a lot of defending the homeland rhetoric, and it's like you have immigrants that come in and they call it an invasion or something like that. But a lot of these people have never been in a fight. It's like we haven't fought on American soil, right? It's hardly ever happen. It's like the most American casualties happened in the Civil War, and that was America fighting Americans. It was America versus America. But many of the other wars that America gets involved in, it's like America fighting overseas. They're sending troops over to other lands, and they don't have to worry about defending, like literally and in a very real way, defending their homeland. And if people actually had to go through the trouble of defending their homeland, then a lot of this immigration rhetoric I think would evaporate, because having to fight like in the city block to block against enemy troops invading your land is like, it's not something that we think about in a very real way. The most of us. It's not like what they're doing in Ukraine or what they're doing in some other parts of the world. In Russia, during World War II, that was something that they had to deal with, defending their homeland. The Germans were deep inside the borders of Russia, and there were several army divisions in there. Their goal was to take over the whole massive country. And one of their goals is to take over Stalingrad. It was a very important logistics area. If they could take Stalingrad, then they can more easily get things like oil to the German army. It's like they can get fuel to fuel the army. This put Russia in a position to have to truly defend their homeland. Russia I think they probably suffered the most losses in defending their homeland. So in the defense of the homeland, it's almost like you got to tell yourself a story. You got to give yourself motivation, or the motivation has to be given to you or granted to you. And so they had a lot of these propaganda in order to keep their hopes up. And I think this movie, a lot of this movie is about the story we tell ourselves to keep us motivated. Now, opening scene of this movie, you have a scene where it's a grandfather hunting with his grandson. And in that scene, they're trying to hunt this wolf. They actually have a trap for the wolf. They set up a deer or something that they basically tied the deer or whatever the bait was into this one spot. And they expect the wolf to kill it. Or it was probably a horse, not a deer. I think it was a horse. And so when the wolf got close to the horse, the grandson was expected to shoot it. And it's in the winter. The little boy has the rifle, and he's expected to use the lessons that he's been taught to kill this wolf. And it is a very impactful scene. It feels so very serious. It kind of reminds me of the opening of X-Men, and which coincidentally also happened. Well, like this opening scene that I'm talking about with the grandfather and his grandson, that was many years before World War II. But in X-Men, the opening scene in that movie featured a young boy who's being separated from his parents, and that was closer to World War II. That the war they was probably in the middle of the war, and this young boy was separated from his parents, and then you see him using his superpowers to pull these iron bars. But except for that part, it looked like a very powerful and emotional scene. And that's how I felt that was the first thing I thought of when I saw the opening scene for Enemy at the Gates, where the little boy is preparing to try to kill this wolf. I think not that the scenes were the same, but they had a very similar tone. It looked like they actually used the same color scheme in order to evoke the seriousness of the situation. And then it transitions to men going to war, like a hard transition to men going to war. And then you learn that the grandson is actually Vasily as a child. The following scenes were also striking because it's like you get these soldiers and they're pushed into this this train. They're like crowded onto a train, and then they're going across the landscape. And then some of the people get off the train. And then after they let some of those people off, they close the train, they lock the train, they disconnect the cars from the regular train engine, and they hook up this up-armored train engine with cannons on the front of the engine. And that militarized train engine pulls them the rest of the way, and they end up in Stalingrad, or close to Stalingrad, where the battle is raging. And these men don't have weapons, they don't have ammo, they're just in the train, and they're locked in the train too. And then they unlock the train and they let the soldiers out. And so the soldiers kind of like running out of the train, and then they're ushered in the boats. And then while they're in the boats, they're being shot at by the enemy, like German planes flying around. They still don't have weapons. They didn't have weapons when they were on the train. They were ushered onto these boats. This was the Volga, to cross the Volga River, and they still don't have guns. They don't have no guns and no ammo. The only people who have guns and ammo are the officers on the boat, who are threatening to shoot any of the soldiers who try to escape the battle. But at the same time, they're being shot at by planes and by people along the shore. So it's a very hard choice. And when it gets really bad, when it's like bullets everywhere, when people are dying on the boats, being shot by planes on the boat, some of the men do try to jump off the boat and desert the army, but then they're shot by the officers. And then when they get to Stalingrad, they get across the river to the shore, and only then are they given weapons. They're in a place where the battle is at a lull, so they get a chance to get weapons, but not all of them get rifles. Some of them get rifles, and then some of them just get ammo. And they're told, if you drop your rifle, if your comrade in front of you falls, pick up his rifle. So you can only get a rifle if somebody dies. Somebody else who has a rifle dies. The soldiers are set loose, and they're set loose to go towards where the enemy is. And behind them are the officers with guns and now a machine gun, because the soldiers are armed. So now the officers have a machine gun, and they're threatening to gun down anybody who tries to retreat. And they have this motto, like, not one step back. That's their motto, not one step back. So they're forcing their troops to only push forward. And Vasily is one of the ones who doesn't have a gun. So he's kind of like running and ducking behind other gunners. And then he'll try to grab a weapon of a fallen soldier, but then somebody else will grab it. So this is all very visceral. It looks and sounds like Saving Private Ryan. It's particularly the Omaha beach scene, when the soldiers are trying to come into the beach and they're being cut down by machine gun fire as soon as they get to the beach. That's what this movie feels like. But at least in the Omaha beach scene, all the soldiers were armed. But in this scene, only some of the soldiers have weapons. Only some of the soldiers have rifles, and then some other soldiers, they're just carrying ammo. And not even a whole bunch of ammo, just a handful of ammo. So this looks crazy. And I am grateful to report that apparently nothing like this happened. Someone who saw the movie, who was more of an expert on what happened in World War II, refuted these things that happened in the movie. He was saying that no soldier was fielded. No soldier was put into battle without a weapon. So something like that didn't happen. Also, they didn't have machine guns behind the troops, threatening to shoot the troops with machine guns if they tried to run away. They didn't do that either. So there are a lot of things that happened in the movie that didn't happen in the actual battle, according to experts or people who were there. But I guess that was a way of trying to differentiate how the Russians go to war and how maybe the English go to war or something like that. I think it was kind of like anti-propaganda or some kind of message against communism. Even the soldiers look like they may have been conscripted instead of volunteering. So some of these things are like points of contention. But however you think of it, it's still a very dramatic setting. It causes a lot of tension. It's like I'm constantly worried about Vasily, played by Jude Law, running around with no weapon, trying to survive an onslaught of just bullets and gunfire and cannon fire and planes, shooting, strafing their troops and dropping bombs. It seems like a crazy situation. That's a very impactful scene. I'll also note that in this movie, it would seem that the Nazis have German accents while the Russians have English accents. And I think this was an English production, so perhaps that's the reason why. There are a few Americans in this production. In any case, you have Law, Fiennes, Weisz, and Hoskins, and they're either English or part English. So they're all speaking with English accent. And you even have Ron Perlman, who's an American. He also does an English accent. I think his more like a Cockney accent, perhaps. But the thing is that this is how the Russians are being portrayed, while the Nazis are being portrayed with the best German accent they can do. Except for Ed Harris, I don't think he really tries that hard to do a German accent. He doesn't have that many lines in the film, and he doesn't try too hard to. If anything, it sounds like an American with a very proper accent, or it could be the dialogue that he was using to make it sound more, or at least gives you the feeling that it's a period piece rather than a contemporary piece. In any case, I thought that was an interesting direction to go with the accent. It kind of reminds me of Star Wars, how in Star Wars, at least in the first movie, most of the bad guys had English accents, while most of the good guys had American accents. And Princess Leia kind of waffled between the two accents in that movie. And this is to say that there's an interesting way that directors can use accents. They can either go no accent, or they can use accents to denote different groups of people. Not that the accents are realistic, but just as a way of noting the different groups that are in the movie. Sometimes accents are important, and sometimes they're not that important. Sometimes it's more important that the audience just understands what is going on. It's less important for them to try to do an accurate accent. So during this battle, it seems like most of the Russians are killed, and it's like a city street or a city square, and they're like dead bodies like everywhere, both German and Russians. The body just kind of like laying around. And you see this Russian political officer. I think he just got separated from his group, and I guess he's trying to get back to his team, and he comes across a bunch of German soldiers. He doesn't happen to have a weapon, and I don't know why, as an officer, he wouldn't have one. But when he comes across these Germans, they don't see him, so he hides with the dead bodies. And as the Germans are going around, they're actually shooting the dead bodies, and to make sure that the bodies are actually dead. And then they move on. After the Germans leave, the Russian officer, he finds that there's another guy in the group of dead bodies pretending to be dead. So it's a funny coincidence how you got two guys hiding in a pile of dead bodies. And then a smaller group of Germans come. The officer, the Russian officer, he sees them, and he's able to grab one of the rifles from the many dead men. There are many rifles there. So from one of the many dead men, he grabs a rifle, and he's going to shoot the officers, or at least one of them. But he's shaking. This is not what he do. This is not his lane. And Vasily, he looks at the officer, and the officer looks at him, and the officer says, "Can you shoot?" And Vasily says, "A little." When he's being modest, when Vasily gets the gun, there are like 5 officers there, and he just takes them out one by one, easily, calmly, without much effort. And this was an amazing scene in the film. It was, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be joyful over people getting killed in war, but that was a pretty cool scene. And as in this scene, the officer turns out to be Commissar Danilov. And this is how Commissar Danilov and Vasily Zaitsev meet in the heat of battle, or in the aftermath of a major battle. Danilov is fully impressed by Vasily's skill. So they kind of form a team, and Vasily is going to be made famous by Danilov. Danilov is going to write a bunch of propaganda to promote what a great rifleman that Zaitsev is. Zaitsev is transferred to the sniper team, and he's sent on sniper missions. And then when he has these successful missions, Danilov will put out a bunch of propaganda in the army newspaper. And like, he revives the army newspaper, and he has his newspaper sent out to the troops, and just basically celebrating Zaitsev and all of his kills. This is expected to raise the morale of the troops, not only the troops, but also the people in the city, because there are people still living in Stalingrad. There's a battle going around. There's planes dropping bombs on buildings. There's gunfights in the streets. But the Russian government won't allow the people to leave. I forgot the reason why, but they wouldn't let, even though they're being fired upon, they won't let people leave. And so they're stuck in the city with no services. I don't know what they expect people to do or how they expect people to live, but they got no services. They just kind of stuck there. And I guess being supported by the army. The original propaganda that the Russians were using was fear. It was like, don't turn around, we'll shoot you if you don't fight. Danilov proposes that they use hope instead. And this is why he's propping up Zaitsev, in order to give people hope instead of just trying to scare them into fighting. I'm not exactly sure how long this propaganda campaign has gone on, but Zaitsev becomes a celebrity. He's actually answering fan mail. And even though Vasily is portrayed as poorly educated, it's not really portrayed in the movie that he's a smart man, but in real life, he's a very different man. When he's being portrayed as poorly educated, I think the reason is because when they see Tanya Shanova for the first time, they start to compete for her right away. And Danilov is dictating this letter to Zaitsev to write to his fans. Like, they read their fan mail, and then they're going to write back to their fans. And Danilov is dictating the letter because, he's the political officer. He's also kind of a journalist, and he's portrayed as a better writer. And the competition is, he's dictating the letter, and he's telling Zaitsev how to spell certain words. Almost like he's emphasizing that Zaitsev is not good at writing. And then Zaitsev, on his part, he starts to make suggestions about what could be said in the letter, meaning that he's not as dumb or inept as Danilov is trying to portray him. So there's a lot going on in this movie. There's also a little boy named Sasha. And we first meet Sasha when he's with Zaitsev, and he's Zaitsev's biggest fan. And then later on, you see Sasha, and he's hanging out with Major Koning. Major Koning is a guy that's been tasked with killing Zaitsev, because obviously the enemy has gotten a hold of some of these Russian newspapers, and they see that Zaitsev is being propped up, and they see that Zaitsev's exploits are giving the troops hope. And also, Zaitsev is killing a lot of German soldiers, especially the officers. So they're like, we got to do something about Zaitsev. So they send their best sniper to try to find and kill Zaitsev. And somehow Major Koenig comes across Sasha, the little boy. there's no scene that kind of explains how they get together or how Major Koenig basically starts bribing this little kid with chocolate and cans of food to get information on Zaitsev. We don't know how they met or how this bargain turned about. I look at this as some kind of editing error because I feel like there's a scene missing where Sasha comes across an enemy sniper, and it's like, I guess Sasha doesn't know that this is an enemy sniper. I don't understand how they transition to this meeting up or this agreement between the little boy Sasha and Major Koenig. But suddenly they're together, and Sasha is giving up information on Zaitsev. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, you still got this love triangle that starts and that needs to be resolved. And part of this love triangle competition is that Chernova doesn't know that she's in competition. Like, she doesn't know that there are two men competing for her. It's like, I think from her perspective, it's just two guys being really nice to her. And Zaitsev, for his part, he's not really part of the competition. Like, he's kind of competing for her, but not as strongly. Like, he's not really trying too hard. But Danilov is trying very hard. Like, he's trying way too hard. So one of the things that Danilov does is that because he's an officer, he can pull strings. And Chernova is like out in the field. She's in the field. She's like having skirmishes. She's in battle. She's like shooting enemy soldiers. And what Danilov does is that he pulls her out of the field, pulls her in the office because she's highly intelligent. She can speak German, so she can read like German communication. So he encourages her to come to the office where they can decipher the enemy communications that they're finding and come across. But he also wants to keep her in the office so that she can be close to him, so that he can put his Mac on while she's there with him. But she really wants to be a fighter. She really wants to go out in the field. And this tug of war between being in the office and being out in the field, that kind of is like a proxy for this love triangle. Like, if she's in the office and she's closer to Danilov, and if she's out in the field, she's closer to Zaitsev. But it's really a one-sided love triangle because she doesn't, like I said, she's not seeking out either one of these guys, at least at first. And Zaitsev, as I said earlier, is not trying that hard in order to like get her. But what ends up happening is that on his own, like, Zaitsev is charming and funny, and he's already like a national hero. He's like the celebrity. He has fan mail. He has a bunch of fans. They see him. They say hi and they cheer him on. He's like a movie star in Russia. So Chernova, slowly and gradually, she's attracted to this. And because of Zaitsev's charisma, she actually gets together with him. And this is a scene, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's a scene that I would consider part of my core memory. I should have a core memory segment because, like, sometimes when I think of a movie, I think of a particular scene, especially if I hadn't seen that movie a whole bunch of times. There's like one scene that I remember for that movie that I think of every time I think of that movie. And for me, it's the sex scene in Enemy at the Gates. And this is a scene where it's Zaitsev's shift to go to sleep. So there are a bunch of men in the barracks, or the building that they're using as barracks. There's a bunch of men laid on the floor, sleep on the floor, all covered up with blankets or whatnot. And Zaitsev is among these men, sleeping on the floor. And Chernova comes over to where Zaitsev is laying down. It's not all the way to sleep. And then she gets under the covers with him. And then she just starts taking off his clothes. Nobody's really saying anything. But understanding the gist of what she is doing, Zaitsev also helps with the undressing. They undress each other under the covers. And then they get busy and surrounded by men and like some guys walking around from one end of the thing to the other, being oblivious to what Chinova and Zaitsev are doing. And I call this like one of the best sex scenes that I've seen because you don't see anything. Like there's nothing uncovered. They're completely under the covers and you can barely tell the motion. The thing that is telling the story about what they're doing is their facial expression, especially Rachel Weisz's facial expression as they're doing it. It's very immersive. It's a very well acted scene. It's one of the best scenes, as I said, that I've seen of this nature. It is. I just can't get over how the facial expressions are doing all the work. Both Jude Law and Rachel Weisz are doing an incredible job of having their faces tell the story of what they're doing. And I just thought it was amazing. It was better the second time I watched it than it was the first time. For me, it was that impactful. So now we know that Chinova and Zaitsev are together. And this continues to build tension between Zaitsev and Danilov. Zaitsev is it's almost like he doesn't understand that how badly Danilov wanted Chinova. And I don't think Chinova understood that either. Meanwhile, we found out that Sasha is a double agent. And that was a relief because I was so upset when I first saw that Sasha was talking to Major Koenig. I was like, how could he? Sasha is Zaitsev's biggest fan. Why would he do this? And then there's a scene where you find out that he's actually taking information that he's learning from Major Koenig and he's giving it to the Russians because they know that Koenig is trying to kill Zaitsev. So he's taking the information. He's keeping Zaitsev safe while at the same time trying to target Major Koenig because they know that Major Koenig is there to kill Zaitsev. Also, as good as Zaitsev is, Major Koenig is impossibly good. So there's a particular scene where Zaitsev and Kulikov, they go to some buildings where they think that Major Koenig might be. They were given information from Sasha, the little boy, and they figured that in that area, they could set a trap for Major Koenig. And they try to set a trap to try to draw him out, but the trap doesn't work. So Kulikov and Zaitsev, they go to change positions. So they get up from one building, they have to go down the hallway of this building, but the building has kind of been split, so there's a gap. The thing is, Major Koenig is there, and he's trying to figure out where Zaitsev and Kulikov are. He's scanning the area. He spies a space where there's a gap between two buildings, or it's a gap where one building is in split. And he's just guessing that they might show up there. So when Zaitsev and Kulikov, they get to this gap, they have a thing where they take turns jumping these gaps in buildings where they've been split up or bombed out or what have you, where they have to jump in a space that would briefly expose them. The last time, Zaitsev jumped first between these gaps. And so this time it's Kulikov's turn to jump first. Jumping first is safer because when you jump, if somebody happened to be looking in that direction, the first person to jump is probably going to be safe because whoever's checking out the area is not expecting or may not be expecting somebody to jump. So the second person who jumps is more in danger. Zaitsev and Kulikov, they get to this gap. Kulikov jumps first, and while he's in midair, he's shot in the head by Major Koenig. It's an impossible shot because there's no reason for Koenig to expect that they would be there at that time. But It just so happens that he is that good. It's like first Kulikov gets shot, and then it's like while he's in midair, and because Zaitsev is right behind Kulikov, like he makes the jump right after Kulikov, not even realizing that Kulikov has been shot dead. It's like Kulikov is dead before he makes it to the other side of the gap. And this impossible shot shakes Zaitsev's confidence. And now he's not even sure that Major Koenig could be killed. Like Major Koenig just killed a guy who trained under him, because Kulikov trained under Major Koenig. The reason that he was teamed up with Zaitsev is because he knew enough about Major Koenig and how the best ways to defeat him. And now Kulikov died from some impossible shot. Now Zaitsev's confidence is totally shaken. So not only is Zaitsev's confidence shaken, but now he's got to deal with a jealous Danilov. And the tension between that friendship gets ever tighter because of Danilov's jealousy. It's like, I don't know if he fully knows that Zaitsev and Chernobyl are supposed to be together, but I think he kind of sees how they are together. Like he's picking up on the signals. He sees the chemistry between his friend and the woman that he wants to get with. And so now he starts to treat his friend like poorly. Like he starts to be a bad friend. Most of the time during most of the movie, Danilov would call Vasily Zaitsev by his first name. He would say, Vasily, like whenever he talked to Zaitsev, he would call him Vasily. But then the tension gets so thick that now he calls him comrade. Like he's just a regular soldier. Like we're not friends anymore. We're just professionals now. Comrade. So because in the way they portray, or the way the word is used in this movie, it's how you address somebody that you're friendly with, but that you don't know. You keep it professional. You say comrade. So it's like, because of Danilov's jealousy, he's building a wall between him and his former best friend. It's almost like by calling him comrade, it's instead of Vasily, it's symbolic of severing their friendship. And he's also talking smack about Zaitsev to the upper brass. Like in a way, he's tearing down the propaganda that he used to build Zaitsev up in the first place. It's also getting to the point where Danilov is putting more pressure on Zaitsev to take out the sniper, Major Koenig. And Zaitsev's confidence is shot, but he's still trying to do this mission. So he's going on one particular mission where he's out in the field. He's hiding with a bunch of dead bodies, kind of like he was in the first movie, or in the beginning of the movie. But now he has a rifle looking for where he thinks Major Koenig is supposed to be. But in waiting for Major Koenig, he falls asleep. So there's a point where Major Koenig is actually exposed, but Vasily Zaitsev is asleep. And then while he's sleeping, he actually looks like a dead body. There's some random German going around, and he's scavenging the dead bodies. He steals Vasily's ID while Vasily was asleep or pretending to be dead. I think that the scavenger is killed, and they find that Vasily's ID on the scavenger. So because the scavenger has this ID, they assume that Vasily Zaitsev is dead. People are upset. They're in mourning. He's gone for a couple of days, but then he comes back to the base. And when he gets back to the base, he's upset with Danilov because Danilov had set up Sasha, the little boy, as a spy. Like you just don't want to put children in danger like that. And then at the same time, Major Koenig, he realized that Sasha is a double agent, and he hangs Sasha in public to draw out Zaitsev, because he knows that the little boy is Zaitsev's biggest fan. They have a relationship. So he hangs the little boy in a place where everybody could see him. And it was a way of drawing out Zaitsev into the open. It's around this time that Chernova and Danilov, well, soon after this happens, Chernova and Danilov, they go on a mission to get Sasha's mother. They're going to, I guess the Soviet government is allowing some people to leave Stalingrad. So they go get Sasha's mother. Sasha's mother doesn't want to leave because she thinks she wants to make sure that her son is safe. She wants to bring her son with her, but her son is dead. They don't want, it's like they're trying to figure out how to tell this mother that her son is dead. And then Danilov, being the propagandist that he is, he told her that her son was alive and went over to the enemy, that he fully went over to work for the other side. So while his mother is disappointed, she knows that he's alive, because that's the most important thing, of her believing that her son was alive, because they didn't want to tell her the truth that her son was dead. So after telling this woman this lie that her son was okay, Chernova and Danilov, they escort her to take her to the boats that's supposed to get him out of Stalingrad. But then there is an attack by the Germans. Chernova is hit with shrapnel while she's escorting this woman to the boat. And it looks like she's taken out. And Danilov sees it, and he believes that she's dead. As much as I like this film, it has a lot of hard transitions that the audience just has to deal with. So suddenly you see that Danilov and Zaitsev, they're teamed up to hunt Major Koenig. Why Danilov is there with him doesn't really make any sense, because he's not a sniper. He's not supposed to be on a sniper team. I guess he volunteered to go, probably because of the guilt that he felt over Chernova's apparent killing. He's all in his feelings now. He's full of regret. And it's really just Zaitsev doing the work of being a sniper. It doesn't seem to be that any other snipers there. There's no spotter. Like usually in a sniper team, there's the sniper, and then there's somebody with binoculars that's supposed to be the spotter. But Danilov is not doing any of that. Danilov is just like in his feelings. So you have Zaitsev with his gun looking for Major Koenig. He knows that he's in the ballpark of where Major Koenig is, because Major Koenig had hung Sasha on a pole where everybody could see. It's an obvious trap. So Zaitsev goes to that trap in order to find Major Koenig, maybe be able to turn the tables on him. So Danilov talks about his regrets, and he admits that he was jealous of Zaitsev over Chernova. And he's telling him this because he thinks that Chernova is dead. And so with this overwhelming amount of guilt that he feels, that he kind of let a woman come between him and his best friend, he wants to do one last thing. And so he exposes himself out in the open. Like he just kind of lifts his head up over the wall in order to allow Zaitsev to see where the other sniper was. So he takes off his helmet, he peeks up over the wall and is immediately killed. Danilov just told him that the woman that Zaitsev was in love with had been killed. And now Danilov, Zaitsev's best friend, was killed right in front of him. So it kind of puts him in kind of a real emotional turmoil at that point. But it did give him the location of Koenig. Koenig thinks that he's killed Zaitsev. Like there was a rumor going around that Zaitsev was dead, and Koenig had been ordered to go home. But instead of going home, he stayed out in the field to try to hunt for Zaitsev because he didn't believe Zaitsev was dead. So after he killed Danilov, he believed that he had succeeded in killing Zaitsev. So he starts to come out of his hiding place, And when he comes out of his hiding place, Zaitsev is like right there, like maybe 2 or 3 feet away from him. and basically he's successful in killing Koenig and getting rid of the German sniper. With that tension relieved, somehow Vasily Zaitsev finds out that Tanya's still alive, and he's able to track her down to well, apparently he's been writing her letters. He tracked her down to the hospital, and he finds her in the hospital, and they get back together. That's the happy ending that the movie wants you to have. But as I said earlier, that's not what happened. they didn't get back together. But in spite of the inaccuracies of the movie, like I said, I really enjoyed it. It's really, if you just take it for the story that it is and how the tension builds up and how they build this dual story of this A, love triangle, and B, these 2 snipers trying to fight each other, I think the movie works on that level. Perhaps it could have been better edited, because sometimes it jumps from one scene to the next, or one story idea to the next story idea, and they don't explain how these ideas are part of the same story, or how you move from one idea to the other. That happens like at least twice. And it could have been more of a flow. Another thing they could have did was use more real elements that actually happen and not leave so much of this stuff out. That's only after the fact. When you think about it, it doesn't really affect the movie, because if you don't know what actually happens, then it's probably a better movie. Even after discovering all of this new data, it doesn't make me like the movie less. I still really enjoyed it. So that's it for my favorite parts of the movie. And now let's talk about the trivia. The trivia, as usual, I get from IMDb. And we'll start off with this one. The film depicts Zaitsev as a bit of an unschooled simpleton from some backwater part of the country, but who knew how to shoot a rifle. In reality, Vasily Zaitsev was an educated man who had worked for 5 years as an accountant in the Russian Navy. He had transferred from the Navy, where he was head of the finance department of the Pacific Fleet in Transfiguration Bay, to the Army as a fighter on the front lines. So he was actually pretty smart, but he could still be depicted as somebody who didn't know how to spell, because that was the real contention in that scene where he's kind of portrayed as not being as smart as Danilov. It's more of a grammar thing, because Danilov was a journalist and he was the propaganda guy. Vasily was good with numbers, apparently. So it still could have worked, but they could have portrayed Vasily as being more intelligent. In the battle scenes, it was deemed too dangerous with so many extras in a confined space to set off explosions by remote. Stuntmen were mixed in with the extras to set off the explosions by stepping on pressure plates. So that's how that works. They didn't want a bunch of extras getting hurt, so they took precautions. Major Koenig, played by Ed Harris, can be seen wearing gloves with the index finger and thumb on its right hand removed. This was quite common for snipers in cold conditions, as it helped prevent frostbite in the hand while allowing them to make delicate changes to the weapon and ensuring a smooth trigger squeeze. So yeah, I would expect that they get some details accurate. The character of Ludmilla, played by Sophie Royce, is a possible reference to another famous Soviet sniper, Ludmilla Pavlichenko, who is credited with 309 kills, even more than that of Vasily Zaitsev, who had around 257 kills. They never show Ludmilla sniping anyone on film, and she's killed while she and Zaitsev were stalking the German sniper, Major Koenig, in a bombed-out department store. Suddenly, they find themselves in the path of a German bombing raid, and Ludmilla attempts to flee in spite of Zaitsev warning her to stay. She is shot by the enemy sniper during her escape attempt. And it feels like that they really are downplaying the contributions that were made by the women who were in this battle. This is kind of a total war situation for the Russians, because while the Germans are only sending soldiers to Russia to fight, every man and woman in these Russian cities, they're basically fighting for their lives. There are a lot of women on the battlefield. There are a lot of women in the Battle of Stalingrad. And they don't really show them fighting. Actually, there was this one scene where they want to go to the department building because they know this is where Koenig is supposed to be hiding. Or they suspect that there's some kind of sniper in that building. There's a team of snipers. I actually didn't even realize they were supposed to be snipers. It just seems like two civilian fighters. I mean, they're still civilians, but apparently they're snipers. So you had the three of them are together. It's Zaitsev, it's Ludmilla, and her boyfriend. And the boyfriend is supposed to stay behind and watch their back while Vasily and Ludmilla, they go into the department store to look for this sniper. And before they leave, Ludmilla kisses her boyfriend goodbye. So the boyfriend stays behind, and Ludmilla and Zaitsev head off into the department store. And when Ludmilla kisses her boyfriend, my first thought was, okay, that's the kiss of death right there. We know she's going to die now because she kissed her boyfriend goodbye. But not only did she die, but the sniper that they were looking for killed her boyfriend while they were inside the building. They're inside the building. They see this German bombing run. They see the planes coming toward them with bombs. Ludmilla wants to run, but Zaitsev tries to tell her to stay, but she panics and she runs. And as it turns out, the sniper that they were looking for was in that building and was able to snipe her as she tried to run away. And apparently he's not worried about the bombers either. The bombers do come and they do bomb the building, but miraculously, both the enemy sniper and Zaitsev survived the bombing run. Outside of Vasily Zaitsev's own accounts of the war, there is no evidence for the existence of Major Koenig. According to the official Soviet account, the sniper was SS Major Heinz Thorvald and was considered the best sniper in the entire German military. Zaitsev maintained that he was told that the name was Erwin Koenig. Erwin Koenig is used in the film because Vasily Zaitsev had wrote his own book regarding his experiences in the war. And he was also interviewed by William Craig, who wrote the book that this movie takes its name from. And the movie takes some elements from the book. And in the book, or the writer, William Craig, interviewed Vasily Zaitsev. And that was a name that Zaitsev gave. But apparently, there's been no cooperation with what Zaitsev experienced. And he's only going by what he was told, not by what I don't know if he recovered the body and saw his ID or whatever. It was just that people were telling him, after he made the kill, people were telling him that it was Erwin Koenig. But apparently there were a lot of German records were destroyed after the war, or perhaps during the war. So there's been no cooperation of that character that they used in the film as a real person. The large set of Stalingrad had been built from scratch in Germany. Set construction began in October 1999 and took nearly 5 months to build. So it was a very impressive set. It really sets the atmosphere for the film. A bravo to the guys who designed that burnt out hellhole. While much is said in the film of Stalingrad being of symbolic value for Adolf Hitler, it was a transit hub for oil deliveries for the Soviets who got their oil from Chechnya and Azerbaijan at the time. The whole southern focus of the Axis campaign on the Eastern Front was to capture the Caucasus oil fields. So it not just symbolic, but would have been a major German victory if they were able to grab Stalingrad. In the movie, they portray it as just them defending it because it's the name of their ruler, but they kind of left out that it was actually a very strategic target for the Germans. Most of the characters in the film are based on real people. Nikita Khrushchev was indeed a political commissar in the Red Army who popularized and promoted sniper Vasily Zaitsev. Khrushchev rose to become the de facto ruler of the Soviet Union from 1953 until 1964. In the film, Zaitsev and his comrades seem to be exploited by the communist leadership, seemingly being thrown into the horrors of war, ignorant of what they were facing, viewed mostly as nothing more than cannon fodder. According to Vasily Zaitsev's own writings on the war, however, he and his comrades in the Navy for a long time begged their superiors to transfer them to the army so they could fight at Stalingrad, knowing full well what they were volunteering for. So, just a little correction. It doesn't play out as dramatic in real life as it does in the film. The last bit of trivia. Some Red Army Stalingrad veterans were so offended by inaccuracies in the film and how the Red Army was portrayed that on May 7, 2001, shortly after the film premiered in Russia, they expressed their displeasure in the Duma. The Duma is, as you may know, it's kind of like the Senate or the legislature in the United States. In any case, they expressed their displeasure in the Duma, demanding a ban of the film, but their request was not granted. So these were veterans of World War II. They saw the film and it was like, no, it didn't happen that way. And they were so upset about it that they went to the legislature to try to ban the film, but it didn't work. And I can understand what they went through as being so mischaracterized, because it was kind of like horrifying to see how these soldiers were treated in the movie, like how they were sent out and only some of them had weapons, or how they had their officer position machine guns behind them in case they ran. It's like, but none of that happened, or at least it didn't happen in that way, the way it's portrayed in the movie. And there was one person that said that everybody who was fielded, everybody who went to war had a weapon. So I think that the movie, because I think it's an English production, they wanted to portray Russia worse than it really is. It's like, yeah, we're going to make this Russian propaganda film, but we're going to make sure that they realize that we still don't like them. So that's it for the trivia. I hope you learned something. I hope I was able to find something on IMDb that you found interesting. And we're going to go over to see what the critics thought. The critics gave it a 53%. The audience score is 82% Rotten Tomatoes. And on IMDb reviews, it's at 7.5 out of 10. Cornell and Petrocelli from CinemaSense.com wrote, with his uncanny gift of leading us from the unfamiliar to the intimate, Jude Law claims his place among Hollywood's leading character actors as he captures our imagination with the innocence, vulnerability, and perseverance of Vasily. And I agree with that sentiment. Marjorie Baumgarten from the Austin Chronicle wrote, Enemy at the Gates is a disappointment primarily because it seems so rich with possibilities. And this is something I don't agree with because it didn't disappoint me. But I do agree that it had more possibilities, but I didn't think of it as a disappointment. Emily Blunt from Blunt Review wrote, what? The actors couldn't manage a few lessons with an accent specialist? Can you even imagine Schindler's List with proper British accents? No, of course not. Actually, I can imagine Schindler's List with proper British accents, and I'm surprised they didn't. But besides that, I think it just depends on how a director wants to portray the film artistically. We got to remember that it's a work of art and it's always an interpretation. So this is how the director wanted to tell the story. And he kind of told the story through accents, as I said earlier, by having the good guys portray one accent and the bad guys portray the other accent. But at the same time, if the story is good, I don't think the accents are really that important. At least that's what I'm learning. Sometimes the accents are important, like it's intrinsic to the story. So like, for example, there are, you have a lot of British actors who are playing American characters. So if they're playing American characters, particularly if they are based on real life characters, then it seems that they probably should do an American accent. Especially a lot of these movies, they're made for American audiences anyway. So if you have an actor that comes over and they're playing a character that Americans expect to have an American accent and they don't, it's not going to go over well. So I think the director, in one case, it doesn't need, the accent doesn't need to be important because of the audience that the director's playing for and what he wants, and in a particular way the director wants to impact the audience. And then also it eases up what the actors have to prepare for, because if the actor doesn't have to concentrate on the accent, then they could focus on the other things that they have to do in their work. So there are a lot of aspects of accents in films that, you can just look at it from different perspectives. In the case of this movie, I didn't think it was all that important. The last review we have is Laura Clifford from Reeling Reviews wrote, "A rousing historical drama and worthy addition to the recent revival of World War II films." And from this, I gather that this review is contemporary to 2001 when this film came out. So I'm not familiar with the World War II movies or the war movies that came out around that time. But whatever those movies were, she thinks that this is a great addition to that genre. Finally, Enemy at the Gates is, as of this recording, available on Paramount Plus. Join us next time, whereas I check out another film featuring Ed Harris. Since it seems like I'm on an Ed Harris streak, it seems appropriate that I check out a film that I've been wanting to revisit for a long time, and has only recently made its reappearance. I got the physical copy to be sure that next time we talk, we'll be talking about The Abyss. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter at Backlook Cinema. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at friends@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be empathetic, be kind, be helpful, be outstanding.